Someone would be at some kind of a turning point in their life. They'd be dissatisfied, looking for something more, as it were. And they'd be approached by someone or make contact with someone who seemed very happy and to have it all together and would be very friendly, and they'd be invited to meet this group or this person, and they'd go there. It would be a very positive experience. And somewhere along the way, they would perhaps meet a leader.
Keep watching to learn more.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we'll be exploring cult behavior and its implications for the way we all live our lives. With me is Dr. Arthur Deikman, a clinical professor of psychiatry at the University of California Medical Center in San Francisco. Dr. Deikman is the author of 3 books, Personal Freedom, The Observing Self, and The Wrong Way Home. Welcome, Arthur.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Perhaps we could begin by having you tell us how you began to develop an interest in cult behavior.
Well, my field of research is in the mystical tradition, and in the course of that I came in contact with many different groups all throughout California and elsewhere. And then a seminar was organized by the Center for the Study of New Religions to study new religions, essentially, indeed representatives of all these different groups. And so for a year, we would meet with generally ex-members of these groups of various kinds, like therapeutic groups, religious, spiritual ones, ones that most people were starting to designate as cults, although not all. And when we talked to people who had been in them and suffered a lot from them, I noticed a couple of things that were interesting. It didn't matter what their educational level was or their financial level, the story was the same. Not only that, but after a while the story that they told seemed somehow uncomfortably familiar to me. In other words, a lot of the things they were talking about had the ring of stuff that I had encountered myself and in myself as well. And so as the seminar progressed, I thought, well, you know, the real point here is not so much are these cults and are they good or bad, but what do they represent in terms of our society, in terms of our functioning as individuals? Perhaps they're not just isolated alien phenomena, but something reflecting basic things in the society. And that's why their stories were all the same.
What was a typical story?
Typical story is that someone would be at some kind of a turning point in their life. They'd be dissatisfied, looking for something more, as it were. And they'd be approached by someone or make contact with someone who seemed very happy and to have it all together and would be very friendly, and they'd be invited to meet this group or this person, and they'd go there. It would be a very positive experience. And somewhere along the way, they would perhaps meet a leader, someone who seemed very powerful and everyone admired very much. And they would have some kind of striking experience, perhaps an altered state of consciousness of some kind, induced by meditation or chanting, or it could be just the sense of being welcomed, of coming home, or some therapeutic technique like guided imagery, something to impress them. And then that group would say, well, you see, this shows that our leader has power, or we're on the right track. whatever it is. The group would also have very humanitarian purposes, ostensibly. That is, they were going to do something meaningful that would help others, etc. And this is a very powerful draw, because most of us want to be able to do something that's going to help the world, let alone save the world. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, here was a group that liked you, that seemed to have a purpose. There were lots of people reinforcing that. They all seemed happy, and it was available to you.
Addressing many of the needs and yearnings and reasons why people are dissatisfied with mainstream life.
Definitely. It definitely would supply something like that. But in addition, what I've come to realize is that along with the impulses to serve the world and to draw closer to God and to have a spiritual life, there's also the wish to be taken care of, yes, to be protected, to find again or to have some form of a parent and a sheltering protective group that accepts you. That people are not so aware of. And that's the hooker. That's how the person gets hooked, and that's what ends up distorting things quite a bit. So once they got into the group, there were many benefits. All of a sudden, they had a bunch of friends, and they had purpose, and they had a
family
routine.
all over again.
Like a family, no question about it. No question about it. And but then they began to find that the family had its own requirements. The requirements were you devote everything, all your resources, all your time, all your energy. In fact, a time given to your own family was looked on askance as a sign you weren't really dedicated. And certainly contact with people outside the group in general was frowned on, and you didn't have much time anyway because the demands would steadily increase. Pairing of any kind in these groups is generally discouraged because it's a split in loyalties. So loyalty was the first thing demanded, and obedience. Because basically you're talking about authoritarian structures. So the person entered into this because they were getting a lot of rewards for it, but then they found there was an iron fist inside that velvet glove, as it were. They couldn't criticize things because that would be saying, well, I don't agree that the leader is wonderful, or I don't agree that what we're doing is correct. And the group came down hard on it. Because these ideas of the group being special and having a purpose and being elevated by virtue of their association with the superior being the leader, these things are the source of all their contentment and security. So you challenge them and you get hit pretty hard. So that which has been given can be withdrawn. And the people would be punished in different ways if they deviated from it. As the demands went on, and the fact that no one criticized anything being done, the beliefs of the group would often get more and more bizarre. And the leader himself would often deteriorate. I say himself because most of them were men, but some were women. And they would deteriorate as well.
When you say deteriorate, there's the sense that maybe the more power is given to them, the more they would tend to fall into abuses of power or paranoia or things of this sort.
Definitely, because they have the same fantasies going in them. See, only instead of them playing out the child fantasy, they're playing out the parent fantasy.
Right.
They want to think that they're powerful. And everyone is feeding them this information, so they get grandiose and paranoid. And a lot of times that happens. So finally the demands will become too great. Perhaps a member will be asked to give up their child or something like that, and they may break with the group. And then they leave. But they may leave thinking that, oh my God, I've left my soul in the group, or what other crazy ideas were going at the time. And they're very upset. They feel they were betrayed. They feel they can't trust themselves. They might feel guilty for things they did while they were in the group. And it takes some months for them gradually to get their bearings and to try and understand what had happened. How did that happen?
And I suppose in our age, the archetype of this kind of behavior would now be the situation that took place in Jonestown.
Yes, that would be very much so. Although the final things that took place was more like a concentration camp with armed guards, and it was pretty hideous from that point of view.
People look at cults and they look at a situation like Jonestown and they say, well, this would never happen to me. My life isn't like this. I'm not susceptible to falling into a situation like these poor, gullible people did.
Right. Gullible people, and I don't wear weird clothes and I don't chant crazy things, and no, I'm fine. Well, it was apparent to me that that wasn't the case, at least as far as I could tell for myself, my friends. And when I looked at the material and I interviewed the members of one group particularly, this was a group that had a therapeutic aim. And almost everyone in the group had advanced degrees in psychology, no less. And it was the same pattern as the others. I interviewed them and I realized there were 4 basic cult behaviors. There was compliance with the group, dependence on a leader, avoiding dissent, and devaluing the outsider. And I began to say, well, okay, let's see how many of these behaviors are present in other organizations, like large corporations, for instance, or the media, you see, or religion, or my own profession of psychiatry. And I went looking, and boy, it was there, no question about it. And I had certain experiences of my own, one in which I went against, what's called your reference group. That is, the people who are important to you, whose opinion matters to you, who you may be dependent on in an economic way or psychological way. I began voicing ideas that were counter to some that were being proposed in the peace movement at the time. And when I voiced these ideas, the people wouldn't ask me, my friends wouldn't say, well, why do you think that way? No, they just draw back and their eyes would narrow, and I could see their hand reaching up and taking my name from the file of good guys, and it was now going in the file of bad guys. It was very uncomfortable. And at one meeting, a public meeting, I was attacked with the same righteousness that I realized I had delivered myself when I had someone else that I considered a bad guy. And it was a very uncomfortable experience. I didn't think I'd be that influenced by my group, but I was. I started shutting up about the things I was talking about, and I began to see it all around me.
In other words, this is a situation in which it was kind of black-white thinking that was going on.
Definitely. Cult thinking is black and white because the security of feeling that you're a good guy with a good group, you see, requires that the people outside your group be not so good. Otherwise, why be in your group? What's the point of it? So there's always got to be the bad guy. And if you look in the society, of course, you see this all the time. How the Republicans regard the Democrats the Republicans, the whites the blacks. Everyone has some group that they can feel superior in relationship to them. And it's totally innocent in a certain way. I remember on one talk show, the host was talking to someone who called in, and this guy says, they were discussing a Southern politician. This guy says, no, he says, I'd never vote for a Southerner. They're all prejudiced. You see, that's the kind of thing that goes on all the time.
Stereotyping.
Stereotyping and trying to say that other person isn't like me.
Well, it sounds like what's going on here is that there's an emotional need that's so strong that in order to fulfill that need, people will abdicate their normal intellectual capacities.
They definitely will. But although this sounds very shocking, it actually takes place in lots of different circumstances. One would say, well, for instance, let's say you're in a large business, let's say a media corporation. And you know that certain kinds of themes will be very unwelcome in higher up, for the people who hire you and pay your fare. At the same time, you want to regard yourself as a very independent guy who can't be coerced.
Freedom of the press, right?
Right. So what do? You shunt certain ideas out of your mind. You're not quite aware of them exactly. One producer was asked if he was ever censored by whatever the media outlet was. And he says, well, no one ever told me I couldn't do a show, but on the other hand, I don't think I ever proposed a show that they would have a problem with. And that's the way it works.
It's a kind of self-censorship process.
And that's what takes place in the cults, too. It's the self-censorship. It's the relegating of your adult status to some other kind of concern. Now, of course, we see this in... If you see the family as the model, after all, we started out so small, learning about the world, learning about ourselves, developing all our thoughts in a world in which we were this high and there were these huge people above us. You know, think about that. All this formative time, we're in a world where there are bigger ones up above us. And these bigger ones offered protection, and they required obedience. There's very authoritarian structure generally. And so we never lose that wish. There's a wonderful cartoon by Charles Schulz on, on the Peanuts thing, in which these two kids are talking about the back seat of the car, and one's telling the other, he says, oh, it's so wonderful to ride in the back seat of the car. It's late at night, and your parents are driving, and they're doing all the decision-making, and you don't have to make any decisions. You don't have to worry. They take care of everything, and you sleep in the back of the car. And they say, yeah, that's wonderful, he says. And then one day you wake up, and it's gone, and it's never going to happen again. You're never going to ride in the back seat of the car again. And they clutch each other. Oh, no. Help, help. Mm-hmm. And we all can recognize that, you know. Yeah. To think that finally the time has come in your life and there aren't any big ones up there towering above you, that isn't such a welcome thought. You know, I became acquainted with that myself because I realized I'd give lectures, and then at the end of the lecture I'd be a little depressed. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand quite why. And then finally I realized what was happening. I was preparing the lectures with the assumption that all the teachers and big people from my early years in training would be there in the back, sort of listening and ready to be won over by me. See, and I'd get up on the podium there with my lecture all set, and I'd look out over the audience, and they weren't there. They hadn't come, you see, and they never did show up.
Well, what I hear you saying is that the reason that the kind of behavior that you observe in cults, which I think most of us, when we see it in that form, it seems grotesque. And now you're saying it's all around us. It's everywhere. In most of our institutions, that is implying that as a culture, as a whole, that we, adult human beings, haven't really outgrown the dependency needs we had as children.
Well, I don't think we ever outgrow them in the sense that they disappear. Mm-hmm. But mostly, we try and be oblivious to them because we're not supposed to be dependent. We're supposed to be independent and autonomous, and this whole country is set up that way. So that by not recognizing these impulses in ourselves, we become subject to them in different kinds of ways. Look at the celebrities there are in this world. Thousands of celebrities, you know. What for? Why? You know, why would they be elevated and up there like this if there wasn't some wish for them to be there? Mm-hmm. If there wasn't some wish to believe that there still was shepherds somewhere, and not to see that every shepherd is still a sheep. Because that's really what goes on. There aren't any different species. There are people with more understanding, they're wiser, but they're all fallible. Mm-hmm. There is no one to drive the car and leave you in the back seat and have everything okay.
Well, I can understand how that might apply to the power that we give corporate leaders or government leaders, but I don't quite follow that argument with regard to celebrities.
Well, have you ever been to a football game after having watched TV football?
Yeah.
There's quite a difference, I think most people find, right? The players are smaller. They're still huge, but they're smaller. The field is small. It's like 2 parking lots. It's not all that big. It's an amazing experience. But if you say to yourself, well, how do I respond to those figures on the screen? Most people respond with some kind of awe.
Yes.
Or admiration, or looking up at them.
Yeah, we idolize them.
We idolize them, we really do. And if you say, why is that so? It's not because they're so wonderful so much, but I think it's because this wish to have larger figures, as it were, is comforting to us.
I think you even use the term idolatry to describe cult behavior.
Well, it's idolatry in the sense that basically you're looking for protection and help in an area where it isn't quite present. Mm-hmm. See, it's a vertical world of looking up or looking down. Mm-hmm. Now, the actual reality of people is different, very much different, but it's generally resistance to recognizing that.
I suppose one of the real hooks for people who get into cults, for example, is they really have on a spiritual search, and they think that this is what they're getting, and yet what I hear you saying is that we don't recognize how much of a sellout it is, how much of our own authenticity we give up in the name of a false spirituality.
Well, if you think of the religion, this is an area where it comes out most strongly. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at the mystics, they say that this reality is not something that can be expressed in any of the terms familiar to us from this world. Mm-hmm. They all say that.
Yes.
You can't put it in those terms. But in the meantime, they talk about it and they write about it. Mm-hmm. And they have to use some kind of metaphors. So what do they come up with? A family metaphor. God the Father, yes. God the Mother. Mm-hmm. And what is required? Obedience. Mm-hmm. Right? Follow God's laws and you will be rewarded. If you disobey them, you will be punished. Now, where the hell does that come from? You know where that comes from. It comes from the family structure. But if you listen to the mystics, you say, how could this be that reality, that larger reality? You know, most of us say, well, now, of course, I realize there isn't any figure with a white beard or something up there like that. But still, the reward and punishment thing? Mm-hmm. Suppose you say to yourself, well, can I imagine for a moment that no matter what I do in this life, there's no settling up afterwards. No one's keeping score. See, I can be anything. I can be a saint. I can be a sadist. I can do anything I want, and it's not going to make any difference after I die. Mm-hmm. Now try that on. Well, it's a bit uneasy, most people.
Well, it would be considered a heresy.
Not only be a heresy, but, you know, I know the first time I tried, I felt quite uneasy. Well, what morals would I have or something? Right. And it illustrated for me how much I still have hovering figures up there, back there, that I think in some sense I need to control or something like that.
Like a Freudian superego.
Like a Freudian superego, but magnified up to divine dimensions, you know.
Well, I think one of the most striking cases that illustrates your point of how religions have become perverted from their original teachings and have thus become cult-like has to be, unfortunately, sadly, in the case of Buddhism, where Buddha himself couldn't be more explicit that there really are no gods.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And yet in the countries in which Buddhism is practiced, it's people come and they worship the Buddha as if he were a god.
That's right.
It couldn't be more contradictory to the original teachings, as I
That's where the
idolatry
comes in. Yes, that's right. There are thousands of Buddha statues all over the place. And actually, Muhammad said the same kind of thing, tried to abolish the priesthood. Well, now you have the mullahs, you see. Mm-hmm. So this is a very deeply ingrained tendency in human beings. We've organized our society in a vertical way in that same sense. And of course you see it in the most ridiculous fashion in large corporations in which the executives are on the top floor and they have their own bathrooms like mommy and daddy, you know, like that, and everyone else is lower down and they reward themselves, you know, it's got nothing to do with performance. Below them they have performance. I remember talking to one CEO, and he said, but you know, it's a funny thing. Once we gathered together all our next level managers, and we said we wanted to give them more power. Mm-hmm. But then we asked them how they would feel about giving more power to the people below them, and they weren't in favor of that at all. See, they wanted more power, but they still wanted that position. So
that's how the Magna Carta developed. The great document of freedom in the Western tradition was
now you may say,
for the nobles.
Yeah, you may say, well, in a way you're just playing with words because these still aren't cults and stuff. But the important thing is that the price you pay for cult behavior is diminished realism, because you're maintaining a fantasy that there are somewhere these protective super people, see, and you can get that security of the back seat again. Yeah. See, instead of the fact that we're all at eye level. So but you have to distort reality to bring yourself to that position.
Are we really all at eye level? After all, there are very real needs that people have for security, and there are bosses and government officials who control jobs, they control finances, they control housing, and people are at their mercy. It would seem that they're actually pulling very real strings.
Well, we're not at eye level in terms of power, but we're at eye level in the fact that we share the same problems of mortality and aging and death. We have the same need for meaning. We have the same curse of imperfection in almost everything that we do. We have the same wishes for love and companionship and esteem. In this sense, we're all at eye level. And that's the most important sense. There is no one, and it doesn't matter what their title, who escapes that. And it turns out, if you feel yourself at eye level with everyone else there, it's a much more supportive and much more open and fearless environment than the other one.
Well, that's, I suppose, what we mean when we say you're an adult. So you look at people eye to eye.
Hopefully, yes. You look at them eye to eye. That's right. That you grow up, as it were, till you're there psychologically as well as. Now, you know, it's interesting that Freud, in theory at least, set up a system whose objective was to return the power that was given by the transference. And that's a rather unique thing.
Now, maybe we better define what you mean by transference here.
Well, as we know, the attitudes we often have towards our parents as we grow up, we tend to experience again towards other people in a similar position of authority. So when someone would come in for psychotherapy or psychoanalysis, the therapist is given a great mantle of power and authority and parental privileges in a certain sense, like this. And it's idealized generally. He or she is put up there like that for lots of different reasons. Sometimes they're elevated, put down, but mostly they're elevated.
Right.
And over the course of the therapy, it should be possible for the patient to come to see that they're really at eye level. Mm-hmm. They have different functions, and that's what's going on. But this is not a parent, and is not going to be. Right. And we fight against it.
So ideally, what you're saying is a therapist takes on this role, he accepts the projection or the transference only to help the client work through it, so that...
Ideally.
Yeah.
And very few places will give away their power. So that's something, at least ideally, that is present. Now, the hard thing in talking about this topic is that no one believes it, you see. No one believes that these kinds of dependency wishes are really operating in them, or they have these kinds of effects. But once you start to look at it, once you start to notice in yourself what happens when you encounter your peers and you want to go against them in some way, when you look at it and say, well, what is your response to someone who disagrees with you? Someone comes up to you and says, well, you know, I really don't think that we should help the poor, you know. It doesn't make any sense at all. Now, for myself, I'd be horrified. But the best response would be, well, why do you think that? Mm-hmm. You know, why? Because the person might have something to teach us. Mm-hmm. But I was taught, if someone disagreed with me in school, fight them. You know, argue. You got a mind. You battle with them. You have your views. They fight. It's a fight. You see, It's not, my God, I'm so blinkered and conditioned. I need all the dissent I can possibly get to help me. That attitude is pretty absent. You don't see it. The dissenter is an unwelcome guest as such.
And it's ironic because we have a society that prides itself on freedom of dissent and freedom of speech, but I guess we never said it would be easy for dissenters.
No, it's not easy. That's a good part of our society, but it's very hard to actually stop being defensive when someone challenges your views and look at it as an opportunity. It's almost unheard of. Mm-hmm. I've written a book about it, but I catch myself over and over again doing the same sort of thing because I was trained to defend my position. Similarly, in devaluing the outsider, we've done a horrific job of that, as evidenced by the AIDS campaign. You know, the AIDS epidemic is a striking example of what happens to the outsider, per se, and then finally to us. Schultz's book and the band Played On is a marvelous depiction of that, particularly.
Well, I know the interesting comparison you make is between the government effort that went into AIDS as compared with Legionnaire's disease.
That's right.
Where you have an inside group where a few people are being affected. We've got just about a minute left, Arthur. So I think maybe it would be a good idea to wrap up now by talking a little bit about briefly the antidote to this kind of cult behavior that pervades our culture.
Well, the best antidote is awareness. Mm-hmm. Once you become aware of these things operating, you can spot them in yourself and in others and not be dominated by them. It's only when we're oblivious that we get caught. Once you see in yourself how much perhaps you would like to accord someone these special powers like this, it does make you free of it. Yeah. But as long as you have to say to yourself, well, no, that's these other people, that's these people in the cult, that's dependent people or stuff like that, then you're prey to them yourself. Mm-hmm.
Arthur Deikman, thanks so much for being with me and sharing what I truly think is a liberating perspective.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. the topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.